And he says, the job of a CEO is to inject risk into a business. This is probably going to cause a lot of people who are watching this podcast a lot of anxiety and how disorganized this truly is. I am always trying to get inspired before I do work. So that sources of inspiration may be.
What is, in your opinion, agent of today wants to make chunky progress, maybe in their marketing, in their skill set, in their domination, in their farm, in their overall brand? How does somebody kind of start this process of doing kind of chunky work so that they can see progress?
I'll tell you my process, which is, I think if you're in business or if you're successful, you start to, for whatever reason, you start to become less tolerant of risk. You narrow your scope of interest and you kind of become too fixated and too focused, and you lose some of that kind of early startup kind of bravery and curiosity and boldness. And so I love the quote from Jason Fried, who's a mentor from afar for me. Jason Fried is the founder of Basecamp. And he says, the job of a CEO is to inject risk into a business, which is so counterintuitive to the way that most of us think, which is you think about the job of a CEO is to avoid risk. And it's like, no, your job is to inject risk. So to answer your question directly, how do you kind of get into the mode of sort of this deep thinking and deep learning? The first thing is that I have got to be inspired to do good work. I mean, and what, like, I've got to, so in order for me to do that, I have to start with an abundance of curiosity about a particular topic. Most people have a to-do list. Here's what I'm going to be covering that day. And this is probably going to cause a lot of people who are watching this podcast a lot of anxiety and how disorganized this truly is. And disorganized is probably not the right word, Sharon, but more it's probably more like just how unstructured this is. But I am always trying to get inspired before I do work. So that sources of inspiration may be listening to a fantastic podcast. And I have a laundry list of people that I follow. A source of inspiration might be reading a white paper on some type of psychological study. Like this weekend, I feel like such a loser admitting this, but this weekend I was reading through this 60-page psychological study done in 1975 that was mentioned on a podcast that I was listening to on the topic of how to make things interesting. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that. Oh, and the title of the paper is called "That's Interesting." And so it goes into depth about how, why we perceive things as interesting as humans. And so I think for me, before you really get into deep work, yes, having a vision, yes, knowing what you're working on, yes, knowing what you're focused on, all of that matters. But that's like the beginning of it. What does a day-to-day look like? You've got to get, and for me, you just got to get inspired. If you think of my swipe file of inspiration, it is growing by the day. And that really gets me in the mode where I'm excited to do some good work. And I think for me, my mantra for this past year has been, someone asked me, goes, my buddy was texting me, what's your plan this year? And my plan was build cool shit with no meetings. That's my plan this year. And so to get into that mode, you got to get inspired. And so you got to create an environment where that becomes commonplace.
One of the ways in which you end up doing better work, deeper work, more meaningful work is to think about your life in decades. So I call this the thematic decades. So I asked myself, what do I kind of want to do in my 20s? Yeah. What do I want to do in my 30s? What do I want to do in my 40s? And a lot of that is, it provides some directional guidance. There's a lot more of folks doing kind of to-do list based work. And I call it like the pull-based system, which is like, hey, I've got these 17 things. I'm going to pull one thing to work on. And that's interesting to me because it seems very orthogonal to time, because time is the only kind of fixed function we have. And so we're like, oh crap, what's next? So let me kind of force that into my world. I think about the world a little differently, where I say, I use kind of broader time blocking ideas. And I look at my calendar and I say, I got a call with Jimmy and I got a couple other things, but I have two 2-hour blocks. Now in these 2-hour blocks, what do I want to do? And where can I make the most progress? And I pull that stuff in, and that's all I work on in those blocks. So now I know that I made a very specific choice to work on those blocks. And when I'm done, I'm done, because I made a choice to work on those things. And so I think for a lot of people, it is start the day with a to-do list of 8 things, check off 6 things, add 14 more things, and then feel bad that you didn't get to any of the things. In fact, you actually made a lot of progress. So just reframing your relationship with tasks and projects is really powerful. And you can't see the quote on my wall, which says, "To do great things, we must do fewer things."
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that thing a lot, which is if I'm stressed, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I just say, okay, what can be one fewer thing I can do? And if I can
Yeah.
just take that off. So it's not like I need more time, I need more space. I just need to do one fewer thing, because the best way to finish a project is to stop doing it.
You know, it's funny to hear you say that, because I'm thinking of one of my favorite quotes from Jeff Bezos when he said, a lot of people ask the question, what's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
And he goes, I ask the question, what's not going to change?
Yeah.
And the thinking of that is like, what is going to be, what do we have a high degree of confidence in it's going to still be the same in the next 10 years? And why aren't we working every day towards becoming better at that or adding more value in that space?